I have in my mind an image of a road. And there's a woman out by that road, looking as far down it as she can. She's already sent word to Jesus for him to come, but there's been a delay. She's looked down that road for a couple of days, and only now does she see Jesus in the distance. When she sent word, her brother was sick. He has since died. It will be a different visit than anticipated. That woman by the road is Martha. Do you see her? She's our guide today. She's going to give us a name for that road. We can't tell whether Martha is calm or crying, nervous or numb, and we don't know if Jesus already knows that Lazarus has died. He does seem to know things in advance in this particular story, or if he was shocked, surprised by unexpected news. Nor can we hear everything that Martha says to Jesus on that road that we can imagine. We've been there. Martha's brother had died. Anyone with siblings must feel a heart pain over that. I have a brother. Many of you have brothers and sisters. And many of us know people who are like brothers and sisters to us. They may not be from the same family of origin, but their care and companionship make them brothers and sisters to us. A loss of any one of them, that's the heartache Martha knew on that road. Now, I know some of the losses that come into this chapel today, but only some of them. Often it's not been the death of someone, but the disruption and separation from those we value, those with whom we've made so much of the journey. Colleagues with whom we've spent much of our careers, people in churches with whom we worked on things that mattered, those with whom friendship has been interrupted, made more difficult, perhaps even ended. Maybe it's different from what Martha knew, but not much. Poet Mary Oliver says that old pain can stall us at the threshold of function. One of our graduates told a current student that she was prepared when she graduated from CTS. She was prepared to preach. What she wasn't prepared for was to preach with a broken heart. We've been there. And that's why we stop at this place called grief. We stop to be still and to process and to heal so we can continue on the way that God has before us. We know some of the grief that Martha carried with her when she went out to meet Jesus that day. And we know how grief can cover and color so many parts of our lives. In fact, we might even be tempted to call that road where Jesus and Martha met the boulevard of grief. I understand that temptation. Grief has an important place on that road, but it's not the whole road. We'll not journey far or well without finding space that honors our grief and time that allows us to work through it. But the road where Martha met Jesus is not the boulevard of grief. Martha gave it a different name. We might be tempted to call that road something else. We might be tempted to call that road the expressway of blame. Martha hints at that, doesn't she? Lord, if you'd been here, I'm just saying, my brother would not have died. Have you ever stood on that stretch of road, hemmed in by frustration and finitude, by systems and circumstances, and there are seemingly no exit ramps? Lord, if you'd been here. Mom, if you'd been here. Dad, if you just taught me this or told me about that. Church, if you'd been here. Safety and services, if you'd been here, this wouldn't have happened. Spouse, friend, pastor, if you'd been here, when the worst was about to happen, here when the walls were closing in for good, here in the moment of my greatest need, here with me while it could still go a different direction. Lord, if only you'd been here. And sometimes the blame is not because of someone's absence, but because of someone's presence. Because you were here, this happened. Because you were here, we did that. Because you were here, we've got this situation to straighten out. If you had been here, or because you were here, maybe Martha was just stating a fact. Or maybe it was the deepest lament, that moment when her emotions were catching up with the events of her life. Her words are close enough to the blame we hear in other parts of our lives to at least get our attention. And yet, even if it was blame that was being proffered, Martha didn't understand that to be the name of that road either. No, it was not the boulevard of grief, as real as her grief surely must have been, and it was not the expressway of blame, though surely that was a temptation. What did Martha say? Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. And then what did she say? But even now. But even now. And with those three words, Martha gave that road a new name. Standing in the midst of an unimaginable loss, Martha says, but even now I know God will give you what you ask. Martha had gone out to meet Jesus on the road called But Even Now. All that she was feeling was real. All that we are feeling is real. But hear the good news. Grief and blame did not name that road. Resurrection and life did. You can trace the lines of ancient parchment, or you can open your Google Maps app. Either way, the news is the same. Any road that we are on when Jesus is on it with us is the But Even Now road. It's the road where hope outlasts despair, where solutions are prized as much as a diagnosis, where resurrection calls forth new life in the face of daunting challenges, and where no fear can keep down the life that stirs within us all. There's a road between Selma and Montgomery. And all the road signs say Highway 80. People could march on that road for voting rights in 1965 against all opposition and danger because they knew they marched not on Highway 80, but on the road called But Even Now. There's a road in Cape Town in front of St. George's Cathedral. And the street signs say Whale and Government Streets. Now, was the apartheid regime really going to be overturned by demonstrations and marches on Whale and Government Streets? Don't even go by those names. People facing great harm and risk, those protesters and demonstrators, and eventually most of the world knew that the real name of that road is But Even Now. In her grief and in her questioning, Martha says, but even now. Now, I don't know very many communities or organizations who aren't experiencing some pretty major changes and transitions, and with those changes come fear and anxiety, hope and opportunity. Whatever signs you and I are reading and trusting at the moment, whatever joy or sorrow you and I bring, I hope we can be a community on the but even now road, where there is sacred space for what we carry with us, and there is profound hope for what comes next. This year, with the grace of God and your help, I'm going to put my feet on the but even now road. And I'm going to try to keep my feet there. And I'm going to look for you there. Because we all know what good happens when we journey hopefully and honestly together on that thoroughfare. But there is a wrinkle to the story. And we will have to deal with that tricky wrinkle in the same way that Martha had to face it. The road where Martha and Jesus meets leads somewhere specific. It leads to the tomb that held Lazarus' body. And here we are reminded of how difficult it can be to embrace resurrection, and how resistant we can be and how distrusting we can be to the fullest measure of life. But even now, Martha said, but what happened next? Jesus said, take away the stone. And Martha said, this is but even now Martha, you remember. Martha said, Lord, are you sure that's a good idea? Do you want to stink up the whole village? And besides, 4 days, that means he's really dead. So let's go back to the house and comfort ourselves with casseroles and tell our favorite stories about dear old dead Lazarus. And Jesus said, I've got a better idea. Let's get Lazarus up and take him with us. The woman who named the road is backing off. We know what that feels like, between wanting to trust and yet holding back, desiring the very best and yet fearing pain and disappointment. We've been there. As vulnerable as we feel in the grip of grief, and it can take our breath away, and as vulnerable as we feel when we want to blame someone because we know things could have been different, there is still a more vulnerable moment. It's when we stand on the cusp of new life. It can be so exciting, and it can be so overwhelming and so threatening. It can come down to that one last stone, the stone that stands between some heartbreaking loss of the past and the birthing of new life. And we draw back to think again, is this really what I want? Life and death, blessing and curse set before us, but the temptation is to negotiate. Right? I'll take life, but just enough to numb the pain of death. Not enough to get me over the death-dealing attitudes and circumstances. We welcomed a baby girl into our extended family this summer. She was so eager to see all of us that she came really, really early. Thankfully, she is doing well. Thank you. So many prayers have been offered in this community. Thank you. We are so grateful. But it's been hard not to travel some on the boulevard of grief, and it's been hard not to travel some on the expressway of blame, but hardest of all is to trust the good news that this is going to work out well, and she's going to be a happy, healthy little girl. There's a certain comfort in that one last stone remaining in place. We reach a point of familiarity, a little breathing space, a comforting plateau. But there's more. More to know, more to experience, more to share. Today, we remember those in South Texas suffering the devastation of Hurricane Harvey and in southern Louisiana. I don't think most of those folks can form the words right now. So like all great liturgy, we are always saying some things for those who can't yet say them. And so with the people of Texas, we say for you in your desolation and loss, but even now. Hate groups are working aggressively and violently to reinstate some of the most demeaning moments and attitudes in this country's history. But even now, God is fashioning a world through us where love wins over hate and all God's extravagant diversity is treasured. We're thrilled to welcome new students this semester, and we hope new students are thrilled to be here. But beginning anything brings its challenges. And any new thing, even those we've chosen enthusiastically, almost always involves some loss. And so we say with you in the joys and worries of a new beginning, but even now. Returning students, faculty, staff, friends, we know well the shifts that have brought new opportunities and new challenges even to our life here at CTS. But even now, the potter is at the wheel, working in and through us to continue the life and witness of this community we cherish. I have in my mind an image of a road. We are on that road, you and I, CTS. And Jesus is there too. We're saying things to Him and to each other that we need to say in order to make our way together. Do you see that road? I hope so. I hope so. I hope you even know its name.